As of 3 a.m. this morning, you are my wife. Elena froze. She stood in front of Julian Thorne, her cold, distant, billionaire boss, expecting him to fire her for being late. Instead, he was staring at the massive diamond ring on her finger with an intensity that made her knees weak. She didn't remember the wedding. She didn't remember the night. She was just the invisible secretary. She was about to apologize and take the ring off, but Julian turned his laptop around. He played a video, and Elena gasped. She wasn't stumbling drunk. She was standing in a chapel, holding his face gently, looking at him like he was the only man in the world. But here is the twist. Julian paused the video right after she said, "I do." He didn't let her see the end. Why? Because the last few minutes contain a secret he has kept for 3 years. A secret that changes this from a mistake into a destiny. We are about to play the rest of that tape. If you want to hear the confession he is too terrified to make, hit subscribe right now. Don't let the secret stay hidden. Let's unlock his heart. The first thing Elena felt was the weight. It wasn't the heaviness of sleep or the comforting pressure of a blanket. It was a specific, cold density dragging down her left hand. The second thing she felt was the pain. A sharp, rhythmic throb hammered against her temples, pulsing in time with her heartbeat, as if a construction crew had set up shop directly behind her eyes. She groaned, shifting slightly, and the sound of silk rustling against skin sent a wave of confusion through her fogged brain. These weren't her sheets. Her sheets were cotton, worn thin from years of washing, and they smelled like cheap lavender detergent. This fabric felt like water, cool and impossibly expensive, smelling of crisp linen and something darker, muskier. She forced her eyes open, immediately regretting it as the sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows pierced her retinas. She wasn't in her cramped studio apartment. She was in a penthouse suite that looked like it belonged on the cover of an architectural magazine. The room was vast, decorated in shades of charcoal and cream, with a view of the city skyline that suggested she was terrifyingly high up. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prick at her chest. She pushed herself up, her head spinning, and that was when the light caught it. On her left ring finger sat a diamond so large it looked absurd. It was an emerald cut, flawless and terrifying, flanked by smaller stones that shimmered violently in the morning sun. Elena stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. She shook her hand, half expecting it to fall off, hoping it was a plastic prop from some prank, but the ring held fast. It was heavy, real, and worth more than she would make in 10 lifetimes. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to summon a memory, a single image of the night before, but there was nothing. Just a black void where her memories should be. The last thing she remembered was the company retreat in Vegas, the open bar, and the feeling of needing to fit in with the executives who usually ignored her. After that, silence. She looked to the other side of the king-size bed. It was empty, but the pillow was indented, and the sheets were rumpled. Someone had slept there. She reached out, touching the cool fabric, and a scent hit her: sandalwood, espresso, and cold mountain air. It was a familiar scent, terrifyingly familiar, but her brain refused to make the connection. She scrambled for her phone on the nightstand, tapping the screen with trembling fingers. The time read 8:45 a.m. The air left her lungs in a rush. She was late. Not just a few minutes late, but 45 minutes late. Elena was never late. She was the invisible glue that held the executive floor together. The quiet secretary who arrived at 7 a.m. to ensure the coffee was hot and the schedules were perfect. In her 3 years at the company, she hadn't missed a minute. If she lost this job, she lost everything. Her mother's medical bills, her rent, her student loans, it all hinged on her ability to be perfect, invisible, and reliable. She scrambled out of bed, ignoring the nausea that rolled through her stomach. She found her clothes folded neatly on a velvet armchair, a stark contrast to the chaos inside her head. She dressed in a frenzy, her hands shaking so badly she could barely button her blouse. She couldn't get the ring off. It was stuck, or her fingers were swollen from the alcohol and the heat. Panic rising, she twisted the diamond inward so it sat against her palm, hiding the band as best she could. The commute was a blur of adrenaline and nausea. She didn't remember the taxi ride or the elevator ascent. She only snapped back to reality when she collapsed into her chair outside the main executive suite, breathless and disheveled. She smoothed her hair, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She waited for the reprimand, for the HR email, for the shout. Instead, the intercom on her desk buzzed. It was a sound she dreaded, usually reserved for senior partners. But the light that blinked was red, the private line. "Elena!" A deep voice resonated through the speaker, calm and dangerously smooth. It was Julian, the CEO. He never called her directly. He always went through his executive assistant. "Come in." Now, the line clicked dead. Elena stared at the device, her blood running cold. He knew. Whatever she had done, whatever line she had crossed in her blackout, the most powerful man in the city knew, and he was waiting for her. The walk from her desk to the heavy mahogany doors of the CEO's office felt like a march to the gallows. Every step Elena took echoed loudly in the hushed corridor, a rhythmic reminder of her impending doom. She clutched her hands together in front of her stomach, the sharp edge of the diamond ring digging into her palm, a physical anchor to the nightmare she couldn't remember. She took a breath, trying to steady the trembling in her knees, but the air felt too thin, too recycled. She knocked once, a timid, hollow sound, and pushed the door open. The temperature inside Julian's office was always 10 degrees colder than the rest of the building, a crisp, sterile freeze that preserved the silence like a museum exhibit. The room was expansive, dominated by glass and chrome, and designed to intimidate anyone who wasn't standing behind the massive ebony desk. And there he was, Julian. He looked infuriatingly perfect, while Elena felt like a frayed wire, her hair hastily pinned back, her blouse slightly wrinkled, her head pounding with the remnants of a chemical-grade hangover. Julian looked as if he had been sculpted from marble. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders with military precision. His dark hair was swept back, not a strand out of place, and his face was a mask of indifferent concentration as he signed a document with a fountain pen. He didn't look up when she entered. He didn't acknowledge her presence at all, leaving her to stand in the center of the room, feeling small, foolish, and vividly aware of the headache splitting her skull. "Sir?" Elena whispered, her voice cracking. I am so sorry about being late. The alarm, it didn't go off, and sit." The command was soft, but it carried the weight of a gavel strike. He didn't shout. Julian never shouted. He didn't have to. His authority was so absolute that a whisper was more terrifying than a scream. He capped his pen, the soft click echoing in the silence, and finally raised his eyes to meet hers. They were dark, unreadable, and terrifyingly clear. There was no redness, no exhaustion, and no sign that he had been in Vegas just hours ago. It made Elena question if she was hallucinating the entire thing. Maybe the ring was a hallucination. Maybe she was still asleep. She sat on the edge of the leather chair opposite him, her spine rigid. She waited for the words, "You're fired." She waited for him to tell her to pack her box and leave the building. She had already mentally calculated how long she could survive on her savings. 3 weeks, maybe 4 if she skipped meals. Julian didn't speak. Instead, he reached out and touched the lid of his slim silver laptop. With a slow, deliberate movement, he rotated the device until the screen faced her. He pressed a single key. Elena flinched as a sound filled the quiet room. It was the tinny, echoey sound of an organ playing a slightly off-key version of the Wedding March. On the screen, the image stabilized. It was grainy, shot on a phone or a tripod, and bathed in the garish pink and blue neon lights of a chapel. But the 2 figures in the center of the frame were unmistakable. It was they. Elena's breath hitched. She expected to see herself stumbling, slurring, perhaps draping herself over him in a drunken stupor. She expected to see Julian looking annoyed, or coerced, or equally wasted. But that wasn't what was on the screen. The contrast between her expectation and the reality was jarring. On the screen, Elena was standing close to him, wearing a white sundress she had packed for the pool. She wasn't swaying. She was looking up at Julian with an expression of such raw, unguarded adoration that it felt like an invasion of privacy to watch it. Her eyes were shimmering, not with intoxication, but with emotion. She reached up, her hands cupping his jawline, her thumbs brushing his cheekbones with a tenderness she had never dared to show in real life. And Julian? The cold, untouchable CO sitting across from her right now was nowhere to be found in that video. The Julian on the screen was looking down at her with intensity, his posture protective, his body angled toward her as if she were the only thing in the room. He wasn't pulling away. He was leaning in. Elena, the video Elena said, her voice clear and trembling slightly. Take you, Julian, to be my husband, to see you when the world is too loud, to hold you when you are tired. I promise to be your quiet place. Elena covered her mouth with her hand, tears pricking her eyes. She sounded so sincere. It didn't sound like a drunken joke. It sounded like a confession she had kept locked in her heart for years. And I, Julian, the man on the screen replied, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the laptop speakers. Take you, Elena, to protect you, to honor you, to keep you. In the video, Julian slid the massive ring onto her finger. He didn't shove it on. He slid it gently, holding her hand as if it were something fragile and precious. I do, they said in unison. Real-life Julian hit the spacebar. The image froze right at that moment, their foreheads resting against each other. The world closed out, the I do hanging in the air between them. The silence returned to the office, heavier than before. Elena stared at the frozen image, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Shame washed over her, hot, prickly shame. She had exposed herself. She had used alcohol as a key to unlock the feelings she had buried deep down, the crush she had harbored for the inaccessible boss, and she had acted on it. She had humiliated him. It's a legally binding document, Julian said. His tone was conversational, as if discussing a merger. Nevada marriage licenses are processed immediately. As of 3 a.m. this morning, you are my wife. Elena swallowed hard, finding her voice. Sir? Mr. Thorne? I don't remember this. Clearly, I was not in my right mind. I must have drugged you, or coerced you, or... She trailed off, realizing how ridiculous that sounded. He was 6'3" and built like a linebacker. She couldn't coerce him into ordering a salad, let alone a marriage. I will sign whatever you need. An annulment. A divorce. I can have the papers drawn up by lunch. I will pay for it. I will resign immediately so you don't have to deal with the embarrassment of having me here. She reached for the laptop to close it, to hide the evidence of her foolishness, but Julian's hand shot out, catching her wrist. His grip was firm, warm, and shocking. Who said anything about an annulment? Julian asked. His thumb brushed over the pulse point on her wrist, sending a jolt of electricity straight up her arm. Elena blinked, confusion warring with her anxiety. What? I don't want an annulment, Elena, he said, his eyes locking onto hers with a predatory focus. And I certainly don't accept your resignation. You are very good at your job. And apparently, you are very good at being my wife. But, Elena stammered, trying to pull her wrist back, but he held fast. This is a mistake. We aren't. We are, he corrected, releasing her wrist only to lean back in his chair, tenting his fingers. The cold mask slipped back into place, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes. Amusement? Determination? The marriage stands. It is valid. And we are going to act like it. He checked his watch, dismissing her confusion as if it were a scheduling conflict. Go home. Pack your things. Not just an overnight bag. Everything. You're moving into the penthouse tonight. Elena sat frozen, the leather of the chair squeaking slightly as she shifted. Moving in? She repeated, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. Mr. Thorne, with all due respect, this is insane. You can't possibly mean you want to stay married to me. I'm your secretary. I make your coffee. I schedule your dental appointments. I am not wife material. Julian stood up, walking slowly around the desk. He moved with a predatory grace, stopping only when he was leaning against the front of the desk, towering over her seated form. He crossed his arms, the fabric of his suit straining slightly across his chest. "That is precisely why you are perfect," he said. His voice dropped to a lower register, stripped of emotion, purely transactional. "Let me explain the situation, Elena. You know the board has been restless since my father passed. They see a single man in his 30s as a liability. They want stability. They want a family man. There is a faction, led by Marcus Vane, that is actively looking for a reason to oust me and install a puppet CEO." He paused, letting the weight of the corporate politics settle on her. "A wife secures my image. It signals maturity. It signals permanence. If I were to marry a socialite or a stranger, I would have to spend months courting, vetting, and ensuring they wouldn't sell my secrets to the tabloids. You," he gestured to her with a flick of his hand, "you have been vetting my life for 3 years. You know my schedule, my allergies, my enemies, and my passwords. You are already discreet. You are already inside the circle." Elena felt a strange mix of flattery and hollowness. It was logical. Cold, hard, unfeeling logic. He didn't want her. He wanted her utility. He wanted the efficiency of his secretary transferred to his personal life. "So it's a job," she said quietly, looking down at her hands. "A promotion. A partnership," Julian corrected. "For 6 months. That is all I need. 6 months to secure the merger and silence the board. After that, we can reassess. An amicable divorce, a quiet settlement." He turned, walking back to his desk and picking up a sleek black folder. He slid it across the mahogany surface toward her. "Inside is a prenuptial agreement, drafted this morning. It outlines the terms. In exchange for your cooperation, I will pay off your student loans in full immediately. I will also cover the cost of a private nurse and specialized treatment for your mother's condition at the St. Jude's facility." Elena's head snapped up. Her heart skipped a beat, then hammered violently. "My mother? How do you know about my mother?" She had never told anyone at the office about her mother's early onset dementia. It was her shameful, painful secret, the reason she wore thrift store clothes, the reason she skipped lunch, and the reason she was always tired. The cost of care was drowning her, a slow, suffocating tide she fought every single day. "I make it my business to know the people I trust," Julian said simply. He didn't apologize for the invasion of privacy. He watched her, his gaze intense. "The facility is the best in the state. She would have a private room and 24-hour care. You wouldn't have to worry about the bills. Ever again." Elena looked at the folder. It wasn't just paper. It was a lifeline. It was the end of the sleepless nights calculating pennies. It was the end of the fear that she would come home to find her mother wandering the streets because the cheap care home was understaffed. The relief that washed over her was so potent it almost made her dizzy. It felt safe. For the first time in years, she felt a profound sense of safety being offered to her, wrapped in the cold language of a contract. But the shame lingered. She would be selling herself. A fake wife, an imposter in a diamond ring. Before she could answer, the phone on his desk buzzed. Julian hit the speaker button. "Yes? Mr. Vane is on line 1, sir." His assistant's voice crackled. "He's demanding to know why you missed the morning briefing." Julian's jaw tightened. "Put him through." A second later, a rasping, aggressive voice filled the room. "Thorne, where the hell have you been? You think you can just skip out on the shareholders because you were out partying in Vegas? This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior." "I was not partying, Marcus." Julian cut in, his voice dropping to a dangerous chill. "I was getting married." Silence on the other end. Then a scoff. "Married? You? To whom? Some showgirl you picked up on the strip?" Elena flinched, shrinking into her chair. That was exactly what she was. Nobody. A mistake. Julian's eyes snapped to her, seeing her recoil. His expression hardened instantly. "Careful, Marcus," he said, his voice low and vibrating with a sudden, ferocious protectiveness that shocked Elena. "You are speaking about my wife, and she is not a showgirl. She is a woman of intelligence and grace, far beyond anyone you associate with. I suggest you watch your tone before I decide to review your tenure on the board." He didn't wait for a response. He slammed his finger down, disconnecting the call. The silence that followed was electric. He had defended her, not with the polite deflection of a boss, but with the territorial aggression of a husband. He looked at her, his expression softening just a fraction as he saw her shock. "Ignore him," Julian said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "He is a dinosaur. He doesn't matter." He looked down at her hand, at the ring sparkling under the office lights. His gaze lingered on it for a second too long, a strange possessiveness in his eyes that didn't match the business arrangement speech he had just given. "Well, do we have a deal?" Elena looked at the folder, then at him. She thought of her mother safe in a clean, bright room. She thought of the weight lifting off her shoulders. She thought of the way he had just shut down a billionaire for insulting her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes. We have a deal." "Good." Julian nodded, masking whatever relief he felt. "Go home. Pack. The driver will pick you up at 6 o'clock. Elena stood up, legs shaky, and took the folder. She walked out of the office in a daze. She went back to her desk, not to work, but to gather her purse. She felt like she was floating outside of her body. She left the building, hailing a cab to her tiny, crumbling apartment complex on the edge of the city. Elena thought she had just signed a cold, heartless business deal. She thought she was just an employee, but she had no idea that a crumpled cocktail napkin in her pocket was about to prove that the cold CEO had actually fallen in love with her years ago. As she entered her small bedroom, pulling her battered suitcase from under the bed, she began to throw her few clothes into it. Worn sweaters, sensible skirts, and pajamas that had seen better days. It felt pathetic compared to the penthouse she had woken up in. She reached into the pocket of the jeans she had worn on the flight to Vegas, the ones balled up in the corner of her closet. Her fingers brushed against a piece of paper. She pulled it out. It was a cocktail napkin from the casino bar. On it, in unmistakable, sharp handwriting, Julian's handwriting, was a note. It wasn't a contract. It wasn't a list of terms. It read, "She thinks she is invisible. She has no idea she is the only thing I see." Elena stared at the ink. The handwriting was steady, not drunk. He had written this. When? Before the wedding? After? And who was it for? Was he writing about her? Or was this just a drunken scrawl about some other woman, some fantasy? But the phrase stuck in her throat. Invisible. That was the word she used to describe herself. That was her identity. If he had written this about her, then the business deal was a lie. And if it was a lie, then what was the truth? She folded the napkin carefully, her heart pounding a new, terrified rhythm, and tucked it into her bra, right against her skin. She zipped up her suitcase. The car would be here soon. She was walking into the lion's den, and for the first time, she wasn't sure if she was the prey or the prize. The elevator ride to the penthouse was silent and swift, a gilded box that carried Elena away from her old life and deposited her directly into a world she had only ever seen in movies. When the doors slid open, she stepped into a foyer that was larger than her entire apartment. The floors were polished marble, reflecting the soft, ambient lighting that seemed to emanate from nowhere and everywhere at once. There was art on the walls, real art, abstract pieces that looked like storms trapped in canvas. A staff member, a kind-faced woman named Marta, took her battered suitcase as if it were Louis Vuitton. "Mr. Thorne is in the study," she said with a warm smile. "But he asked that you settle in first. I'll show you to the master suite." Master suite. The words made Elena's stomach flip. The bedroom was the same one she had woken up in, but now, in the evening light, it looked even more imposing. The city lights twinkled through the glass walls like a sea of diamonds. Marta opened a door to the side. "And the closet, madam?" Elena stepped inside and gasped. It wasn't a closet, it was a boutique. Rows of pristine shelving stretched to the ceiling. But they weren't empty. They were filled. Racks of silk blouses in soft pastels, cashmere sweaters in cream and navy, tailored trousers, and evening gowns that looked like liquid moonlight. She reached out, touching the sleeve of a coat that felt softer than a cloud. She checked the tag. Her size. Not just her generic size, but her exact size. The shoes on the backlit shelves were her size. "Mr. Thorne had a stylist curate this for you this afternoon," Marta said, her tone suggesting this was a normal Tuesday occurrence. "He wanted to ensure you had a wardrobe befitting your new position." Elena felt a wave of dizziness. It was too much. The luxury was suffocating. It was beautiful, undeniably so, the kind of lifestyle porn that people scrolled through on Instagram for hours, but to stand in the middle of it felt like wearing a costume. She was an imposter in a palace. She looked down at her own clothes, faded jeans and a sweater that was pilling at the cuffs. She didn't belong here. She belonged in the shadows, taking notes, not wearing silk. She retreated to the main living area, needing space. She found the kitchen. It was a chef's dream, all stainless steel and black granite, looking completely unused. It was cold, pristine, and intimidating. She instinctively looked for the coffee maker. If she could just do something useful, something familiar, maybe the panic would subside. She found the espresso machine, a complex beast of chrome and dials, and began to prepare a cup, her hands moving through the muscle memory of 3 years of service. "What are you doing?" Elena jumped, spinning around. Julian was standing in the doorway. He had shed his suit jacket and tie. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms that were surprisingly muscular, dusted with dark hair. He looked less like a CEO and more like a man, which somehow made him more dangerous. I was making you coffee, sir," she stammered, gripping the counter. "It's 8 p.m. You usually have a double shot if you're working late." Julian walked into the kitchen, the space suddenly feeling smaller. He stopped in front of her, gently taking the portafilter from her hand and setting it down. "Elena," he said, his voice low and firm, "you are not my secretary here. You are my wife. But I don't know how to do that," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know how to serve you. I don't know how to be with you." "You'll learn," he said. "And the first lesson is this: stop calling me sir. My name is Julian." "I can't," she breathed. "Say it." He leaned closer, his eyes searching hers. "Julian, Julian," she squeaked. "Better." A faint, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Now sit down. You look like you're about to faint." He guided her to one of the high-back stools at the island. Then, he did something that shattered her worldview completely. He walked to the fridge, pulled out fresh vegetables, a carton of eggs, and a block of Parmesan. He grabbed a knife. The CEO of Thorne Enterprises, the man who moved billions with a phone call, began to chop onions. Elena watched in stunned silence. He moved with the same precision he used in board meetings, dicing the vegetables with rhythmic efficiency. He heated a pan, the smell of butter and sautéing onions filling the cold, vast kitchen with a sudden, overwhelming warmth. It was domestic. It was intimate. It was normal. "I didn't know you could cook," she said softly. "I find it meditative," he replied, not looking up. "It's simple. Input, process, output. Unlike people." He glanced at her. "And you need to eat. You didn't have lunch. I checked your schedule." He plated a perfect omelette and slid it in front of her. "Eat." Elena took a bite. It was delicious. The contrast between the cold, sterile penthouse and this warm, simple meal cooked by his hands made her chest ache. He wasn't just housing her, he was caring for her. For a moment, the business arrangement faded, and she felt a flicker of something real. Safety. Later that night, the feeling of safety was tested. Elena lay in the guest room she had insisted on taking. She couldn't bring herself to share the master bed yet. The house was silent, wrapped in the stillness of the high-rise night. She got up to get a glass of water, padding softly down the hallway. As she passed the study, she heard his voice. The door cracked open a sliver, a line of golden light spilling onto the floor. "No," Julian was saying. His voice was hushed, urgent. "She doesn't know. The doctor said the amnesia could be temporary, or it could be permanent. It was a lot of alcohol, Marcus. A lot." Elena froze, her hand hovering over the wall. "I'm not going to tell her," Julian continued, his tone darkening. "Not yet. If she knew the truth about that night, she'd run. She doesn't remember what she said. She doesn't remember what I said. I need to wait until she does. I need her to remember it on her own. Elena backed away, her heart thumping against her ribs. What is the truth? What had she said? What had he said? The note in her pocket burned against her skin. Invisible. Was that it? Had she confessed her love? Or was it something worse? Has she revealed a secret? Or had he done something she couldn't forgive? She retreated to her room, locking the door behind her. The safety of the kitchen scene evaporated, replaced by the chilling realization that her husband wasn't just protecting her. He was hiding something, and he was terrified of her finding out. The invitation was heavy, embossed with gold leaf, and it felt like a court summons. The Thorn Foundation Annual Gala. It was the premier event of the season, a Shark Tank filled with the city's elite, old money dynasties, and ruthless corporate climbers. For 3 years, Elena had organized this event from the shadows, coordinating caterers, managing guest lists, and ensuring the floral arrangements were symmetrical. She had never attended. She was the help, the invisible hand that made the magic happen. Tonight she was the guest of honor. She stood in front of the full-length mirror in the master bedroom, barely recognizing the reflection staring back. The dress Julian's stylist had chosen was a masterpiece of midnight blue velvet, hugging her curves before cascading to the floor in a shimmering pool. It was elegant and modest yet undeniably sensual, exposing the column of her neck and the delicate slope of her shoulders. Her hair was swept up in an intricate chignon, securing the diamond earrings that matched the heavy ring on her finger. She looked like a queen. She felt like a fraud. You look breathtaking. Elena turned. Julian was leaning against the doorframe, dressed in a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. His gaze was intense, sweeping over her with an appreciation that made her skin prickle. It wasn't the lecherous look of the men at the office. It was a look of pride, of possession. I feel like I'm wearing a costume, she admitted, her voice small. Everyone there knows who I am, Julian. They know I was answering phones last week. They're going to laugh. Let them, Julian said, walking over to her. He stood behind her, his eyes meeting hers in the mirror. He placed his hands on her shoulders, his grip warm and grounding. You are not a secretary tonight, Elena. You are Mrs. Thorn, and anyone who laughs at you answers to me. The venue was a kaleidoscope of crystal chandeliers and flashing cameras. As they stepped out of the limousine, the paparazzi went wild, a wall of blinding flashes and shouted questions. Mr. Thorn, who is she? Is it true you're married? Elena's instinct was to shrink, to hide behind him, but Julian's hand was firm on the small of her back, guiding her, anchoring her. He didn't rush. He walked with a calm, deliberate pace, forcing the world to slow down to his rhythm. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of familiar faces, board members who had ignored her greetings for years and socialites who had spilled drinks on her without apologizing. Now they stopped. They stared. The whispers were audible, a hissing current of gossip that followed them as they moved through the room. Julian was pulled away by a senator near the bar, leaving Elena momentarily alone near a towering display of white roses. She reached for a glass of champagne, her hand trembling slightly. Well, Cinderella really did make it to the ball. The voice was sweet, sharp, and laced with venom. Elena turned to see Vanessa Sterling. Vanessa was the daughter of a rival CEO, a woman who had been publicly gunning for Julian's hand, and his merger, for years. She was beautiful in a predatory way, dressed in crimson silk that screamed for attention. Vanessa, Elena said, her throat dry. Hello? I have to hand it to you, Elena, Vanessa said, stepping closer, her perfume cloying and expensive. She looked Elena up and down with a sneer of amusement. I didn't think you had it in you. Most secretaries just sleep with the boss for a bonus. You managed to trap him in a ring. What did you use? Pregnancy scare? Blackmail? Elena flinched, the cruelty of the words cutting deep because they echoed her own insecurities. It wasn't like that, she stammered. Oh, please. Vanessa laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. Look at you. You're trembling. You know you don't belong here. These people are sharks, honey. You're just a little guppy who swam too far up. Julian is using you. Probably to make me jealous or to annoy his board. Once the novelty wears off, you'll be back in the typing pool where you belong. Elena felt her chest tighten. The shame was hot and suffocating. She wanted to run. She wanted to tear off the velvet dress and disappear. She took a step back, her eyes dropping to the floor. Vanessa. The name was spoken quietly, but it silenced the immediate vicinity. Julian appeared at Elena's side, seemingly out of nowhere. He didn't look at Vanessa. He was looking at Elena, his expression unreadable but his jaw set in a line of granite. He slid his arm around Elena's waist, pulling her flush against his side. The contact was electric, a sudden transfer of strength. "I wasn't aware I invited you to offer career counseling to my wife," Julian said, turning his cold and passive gaze onto Vanessa. Vanessa faltered, her smile slipping. "Julian, darling, I was just making conversation, just welcoming the help to the fold." "Elena is not the help," Julian said. His voice was smooth, but it carried a lethal edge that made the nearby guests stop their conversations to listen. "She is the most intelligent person in this room. While you were spending your father's money on vacations, she was helping me build an empire. She knows more about the market, about this company, and about loyalty than you ever will." He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the humiliation shift from Elena to Vanessa. "Furthermore," Julian continued, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly polite register, "if you ever speak to her with anything less than absolute respect again, I will personally ensure your father's company loses its credit line by the end of the business day. Do we understand each other?" Vanessa went pale. She opened her mouth, closed it, and then nodded stiffly, retreating into the crowd like a scolded child. Elena looked up at Julian, her heart pounding. He hadn't just defended her, he had elevated her. He had claimed her competence, her intelligence, and her worth. He looked down at her, the cold mask melting away to reveal something warm and fierce. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, ignoring the staring crowd. "Yes," Elena breathed. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," he murmured, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "It's the truth." The ride home was silent, but the air in the limousine was thick, charged with a tension that hadn't been there before. The adrenaline of the confrontation was fading, replaced by a hyper-awareness of his body next to hers in the dark leather interior. The partition was up. They were alone. Elena looked at him. The streetlights played across his face, illuminating the sharp angle of his jaw and the curve of his lips. He was powerful and terrifying, and tonight he had been her hero. "Why did you do that?" she asked in the darkness. "You didn't have to go that far." Julian turned to her. "She was wrong. You aren't a guppy, Elena. You're the only real thing in that entire room." He shifted, leaning toward her. The movement was slow and inevitable. Elena held her breath, her lips parting slightly. He was close now, so close she could feel the heat radiating from him and smell the sandalwood and champagne on his breath. His eyes dropped to her mouth. The air crackled. She wanted him to kiss her. God, she wanted him to kiss her. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing her lower lip. He leaned in, his lashes lowering. Elena closed her eyes, tilting her head back, surrendering. Then he stopped. She felt him stiffen. His breath hitched, a sharp intake of air, and then he pulled back. Not gently, but abruptly, as if he had touched a hot stove. Elena opened her eyes, confused and bereft. Julian was looking away, staring out the window, his hand clenched into a fist on his knee. His jaw was tight again. "We're home," he said, his voice rough, strained. The car hadn't stopped moving. Why? Why had he pulled away? It wasn't a lack of desire. She had seen the hunger in his eyes. It was restraint. Painful, forced restraint. What was stopping him? The contract? Or was it the secret he had whispered about in the study? The memory she didn't have? As the car pulled into the garage, Elena felt a new kind of ache. Not fear, not shame, but the sharp, hollow pang of a connection severed right before the spark could catch fire. The days turned into weeks, and the penthouse, once a cold museum of glass and chrome, began to feel like something impossible, a home. The awkwardness of the first few days dissolved, replaced by a rhythm that felt dangerously natural. They weren't just coexisting, they were meshing, two gears finally finding their sync. It started with small things. Coffee in the morning became a ritual, not a service. Elena would wake up to find a mug waiting for her on the kitchen island, perfectly brewed, with a splash of oat milk, exactly how she liked it. In return, she started organizing his life not as an assistant, but as a partner. She managed his stress, intercepting calls she knew would ruin his evening and booking tables at quiet restaurants where she knew he could actually eat without being pitched a business idea. They developed a language of their own. A raised eyebrow from Julian across the dinner table meant, "This sauce is terrible, isn't it?" A slight tap of Elena's finger on her wrist meant, "We need to leave this party in 5 minutes, or I'm going to scream." They were a team. One rainy Tuesday, Julian came home looking grayer than the storm outside. A merger in Tokyo had fallen through. He walked in, loosened his tie, and collapsed onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. The old Elena would have quietly retreated to her room. The new Elena sat down next to him. She didn't ask questions. She simply picked up her book and started reading aloud. It was a silly mystery novel, something light and inconsequential. At first, he didn't move. But slowly, the tension began to bleed out of his shoulders. He shifted, laying his head back against the cushions, listening to the cadence of her voice. Eventually, he slid down until his head was resting in her lap. Elena froze for a heartbeat, then, instinctively, her hand found its way to his hair. She carted her fingers through the dark strands, a soothing, repetitive motion. He sighed, a deep, shuddering exhale that seemed to release the weight of the entire world. Within minutes, the most powerful man in the city was asleep, vulnerable and guarded only by her. It was in these quiet moments that the lines blurred. Watching movies on Friday nights, arguing playfully over popcorn flavors, him teaching her how to play chess, his hand covering hers to guide a piece, his breath warm on her neck, her fixing his tie in the morning, her hands smoothing the silk against his chest, feeling the steady thud of his heartbeat. Elena knew she was in trouble. She was falling in love with him. It wasn't the starstruck crush she had nursed from her desk. This was real. It was love for the man who grumbled when he lost at Monopoly, the man who saved the green gummy bears for her because he knew they were her favorite. But every time the feeling swelled in her chest, the ghost of the contract rose to choke it back. 6 months, she would remind herself as she watched him sleep. This is a job. You are a placeholder. She convinced herself that his kindness was just part of the deal. A good boss taking care of a valuable asset. He needed a happy wife for the cameras, so he made sure she was happy. It was transactional affection. It had to be. Because if it wasn't, why hadn't he kissed her? Why did he still sleep in the other room? Why did he still pull away whenever the air got too thick? For a few weeks, it felt like a perfect fairy tale. But tales don't have secrets. In exactly 2 minutes, Elena will press play on a video file that Julian tried to hide, and the truth she discovers will shatter this perfect illusion into a million pieces. One evening, Julian was in the shower, the sound of running water a distant hum in the quiet apartment. Elena was in the living room, tidying up the coffee table. His tablet was sitting there, the screen glowing softly with a notification. She went to move it, but her thumb accidentally brushed the screen, waking it up. It was open to the gallery, and there, frozen in a thumbnail, was the video from Vegas. Elena's heart skipped a beat. She stared at the image. It was the same one he had shown her in his office, the "I do" moment. But something was different. The timestamp. The video file was 12 minutes long. Julian had only shown her 3 minutes. Curiosity, cold and sharp, pierced through the warm domestic haze. Why would he keep the rest? Was it just drunken rambling? Or was there something else? The memory of his conversation with Marcus in the study echoed in her mind. She doesn't remember yet. I need to wait until she does. She looked toward the hallway. The water was still running. She had time. Her hand trembling, she tapped the play button. The video started where the previous one had left off. "I do," they said. The justice of the peace pronounced them man and wife. They kissed, a quick, surprisingly chaste press of lips. Then, the camera angle shifted. Someone, Julian, had taken the phone off the tripod. He was holding it now, the camera facing selfie mode. The video showed them walking down the strip, the neon lights blurring behind them. Elena was laughing, holding onto his arm, her head resting on his shoulder. They didn't look like a CEO and his secretary. They looked like two people deeply, hopelessly in love. Then, the scene was cut. They were back in the hotel room. Elena was sitting on the edge of the bed, the dress slightly rumpled. She wasn't laughing anymore. She was crying. Not the ugly, sloppy crying of a drunk, but soft, silent tears streaming down her face. "Hey!" Julian's voice came from behind the camera, soft and worried. The camera moved closer, then set down on the nightstand, capturing them both. Julian sat next to her, taking her hands. "Elena, what's wrong? Did we make a mistake?" "No." Video Elena whispered, shaking her head. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and painfully open. "It's not a mistake. It's a dream. That's why I'm crying. Because I'm going to wake up." "You're not dreaming," Julian said, wiping a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "I have to be," she choked out. "Because in real life, you don't see me. I'm just the furniture, Julian. I'm the ghost in your office. I've loved you for 2 years, and I've been invisible the whole time. Tonight is the only time I've ever been real." Elena, watching in the penthouse, covered her mouth, a gasp trapped in her throat. She had confessed. She had laid her soul bare. But it was what happened next that stopped her heart. On the screen, Julian's face didn't show pity. It didn't show shock. It crumpled with a raw, agonizing guilt. He grabbed her face in both hands, forcing her to look at him. "You have never been invisible," Julian said fiercely, his voice cracking. "God, Elena, do you have any idea? I look for you every morning. I make up reasons to walk past your desk. I didn't marry you because I was drunk. I married you because when you asked me, it was the first time I allowed myself to say yes to what I actually wanted." He leaned his forehead against hers. "I've been in love with you since the day you fixed my tie before the shareholders' meeting 3 years ago. I was just too much of a coward to cross the line." The video ended. The screen went black. Elena sat in the silence, the tablet slipping from her numb fingers onto the soft carpet. The world tilted on its axis. He hadn't married her for the board. He hadn't married her for a merger. He had married her because he loved her. And he had lied. He had presented this as a cold business arrangement. Why? Because she had said she thought it was a dream? Because he thought she would reject him if she knew the truth when she was sober? He had manipulated her into the marriage with a contract because he didn't think he could have her any other way. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. The shower had stopped. "Elena?" Julian's voice called out, casual and warm. "Did you see where I put my—" He walked into the living room, a towel slung low around his hips, water droplets clinging to his chest. He stopped dead when he saw her face. He saw the tablet on the floor. He saw the tears standing in her eyes. The warmth vanished from his face, replaced by a pale, horrified realization. "Elena," he breathed. She stood up, her legs shaking. "You lied," she whispered. "It was never business." Elena stared at him, the tablet's black screen reflecting the turmoil in her eyes. The silence in the penthouse was no longer comfortable. It was thick, suffocating, and charged with the electricity of a storm about to break. "You lied," she repeated, her voice gaining a tremor of strength. "You sat in that office, you looked me in the eye, and you sold me a business deal. You talked about board members and mergers and 6-month timelines. But that wasn't it at all, was it?" Julian stood rooted to the spot, his bare chest rising and falling rapidly. The towel around his waist felt like a flimsy shield against the accusation in her gaze. He ran a hand through his damp hair, his usual composure shattered. "Elena, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" she demanded, stepping closer. "That you took advantage of my amnesia? That you manipulated me into moving in here, into playing house, because you were too afraid to tell me the truth? You let me believe I was just an employee to you. Just a utility. I was protecting us. Julian said, his voice rough. He took a step toward her, hand outstretched, but stopped when she flinched back. You saw the video. You were heartbroken, Elena. You thought you were invisible. You thought it was a dream. If I had told you the next morning, when you were panicked, hungover, and terrified of losing your job, that I was in love with you, that I had been in love with you for years, you would have run. You would have thought I was mocking you, or that I was still drunk, so you drafted a contract instead? She countered, tears finally spilling over. You bought me? You paid off my debts so I would have to stay. I gave you a reason to stay that your brain could accept, he shouted, the control finally snapping. His voice echoed off the high ceilings. I needed time. I needed you to see me, the real me, not the boss on the pedestal. I wanted you to fall in love with me here, in the quiet, without the power dynamic in the way. And I thought if we had 6 months, maybe you would remember. Maybe you would choose me. I did choose you, she cried, pointing at the tablet on the floor. I chose you in that video. I told you I loved you. And you stole that memory from me. You hid it. You made me feel like an imposter in my own marriage. The betrayal cut deeper than the deception. It was the feeling of foolishness. All those weeks of feeling unworthy, of trying to earn her place, of holding back her own growing feelings because she thought it was a one-sided contract. She had been guarding her heart against a man who had already claimed it. I didn't steal it, Julian said, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. I was waiting to give it back. I wanted you to know that you were safe first. Safe? Elena laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. I don't feel safe, Julian. I feel managed. I feel like another one of your projects. She turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. The domestic bliss of the last few weeks, the cooking, the reading, the laughter, suddenly felt tainted. Was it all a performance? Was he just waiting for the right moment to reveal the twist? Julian moved then, closing the distance between them. He reached out, his hands hovering over her shoulders, afraid to touch. Elena, look at me. Everything I have done, everything I have built in these last few weeks, it was real. The cooking, the movie nights, the way I look at you, none of that was a lie. The contract was a lie. The feelings were the only truth I had. He sounded shattered. The arrogance of the CEO was gone, replaced by the raw panic of a man watching his world crumble. Elena turned back to him, searching his face. She saw the fear in his dark eyes. She saw the love she had been desperate to find, but now that it was here, it was wrapped in manipulation. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to collapse into his arms and let him hold her. But the trust was fractured. I need time, she whispered. I can't just switch gears. You can't just drop this on me and expect me to be okay. Take all the time you need, Julian swore. I'm not going anywhere. We can't. His phone on the kitchen island began to ring. It wasn't the soft chime of a text. It was the jarring, relentless trill of the emergency line. It rang once, twice, cutting through the emotional wreckage of the room like a siren. Julian ignored it, his eyes fixed on her. Answer it, Elena said dully. It's the red line. I don't care, he growled. Julian, answer it, he cursed, snatching the phone up. What? He barked into the receiver. Elena watched his face change. The vulnerability vanished instantly, replaced by a mask of cold, hard steel. His skin paled. When? He demanded. How bad is the leak? Is the server isolated? Okay. Lock down the building. I'm on my way. He hung up, looking at Elena with a torn expression. There's been a massive data breach. Someone hacked the encrypted client files. If I don't go now, the company could be under investigation by morning. It's vain. It has to be. He looked at her, then at the door, paralyzed by the choice. Go, Elena said. She felt exhausted, drained of all fight. Go save your company, Julian. Elena, we aren't done, he said urgently, grabbing a shirt from the back of the sofa and pulling it on. I am coming right back. Do not leave, please. We need to finish this. Just go. She turned her back on him. She heard him hesitate. Then, the sound of him pulling on shoes and grabbing his keys. I love you, he said back to her. Remember that. The door slammed shut. The silence rushed back in, heavier than before. Elena stood alone in the center of the beautiful, expensive cage, the echo of his confession warring with the sting of his deception. He loved her. He had lied to her. And now, he was gone, leaving her alone with the truth and the ghosts of a night she was only just beginning to remember. 2 hours passed. The penthouse was a tomb of silence, the city lights below mocking Elena with their indifferent twinkle. She hadn't moved from the sofa, her mind replaying the video, replaying Julian's desperate explanation. I was protecting us. Was he? Or was he protecting himself? The buzzer from the lobby startled her. It was late, nearly midnight. Mrs. Thorne, the concierge's voice crackled through the intercom. There is a Mrs. Eleanor Thorne here to see you. She says it is urgent. Julian's mother, the matriarch. Elena had only met her once, at the gala, from a distance. She was a woman made of ice and pearls, terrifying in her perfection. Send her up, Elena said, her voice hollow. Maybe Julian had sent her. Maybe something had happened to him. When the elevator doors opened, Eleanor Thorne stepped out. She didn't look like a woman bringing bad news about an accident. She looked like a general surveying a conquered battlefield. She wore a Chanel suit that probably cost more than Elena's college education, and her silver hair was coiffed into a helmet of intimidation. So, Eleanor said, her eyes sweeping over the living room before landing on Elena. You are the girl. I'm his wife, Elena said, standing up. She tried to channel some of the confidence Julian had instilled in her, but she felt flimsy in her oversized sweater and leggings. For now, Eleanor corrected, walking past her to the kitchen island. She placed a leather portfolio on the counter, identical to the one Julian had given Elena, but thicker. I assume Julian is dealing with the little hiccup at the office? Marcus can be quite messy when he's desperate. Elena stiffened. You know about the hack? My dear, I know everything. Eleanor smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Just as I know about the little arrangement you two have. The 6-month contract. The debt payoff. Very pragmatic. Very Julian. She tapped a manicured nail on the portfolio. However, I thought you should see the addendum he filed with the family trust yesterday. It concerns the post-contract plans. I don't want to see it, Elena said, her stomach twisting. Oh, you do, Eleanor purred. She flipped the folder open. You see, Julian is a romantic at heart, but he is a businessman first. This document outlines the asset transfer scheduled for 6 months from now. The day your contract ends. Elena looked. She couldn't help it. The document was dense with legalese, but certain phrases jumped out. Dissolution of marriage. Settlement. Transfer of engagement ring to Vanessa Sterling. Eleanor read the name aloud, though it wasn't there. Or someone like her. You see, the board needs a wife, yes. But they need a wife with pedigree. Julian bought himself time with you. He needed someone safe, someone who wouldn't ask questions, someone he could pay to leave quietly while he vetted a proper candidate for the long term. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. No, she whispered. He told me. He said he loved me. Eleanor laughed softly. Of course he did. Men will say anything to keep a woman compliant, especially when they need her to play a role. And keeping that video? Eleanor gestured vaguely, though how she knew about it. Elena didn't question her state of shock. It's leverage, dear. Insurance. If you ever tried to fight the prenup, he has proof you were unstable, emotional, and possibly intoxicated when the union occurred. It paints you as the desperate secretary and him as the gallant savior. The words struck Elena like physical blows. It made sense. Horrible, twisting, logical sense. The hidden video wasn't a keepsake. It was blackmail material. The confession of love wasn't real. It was damage control because she had found the tablet. He was planning to discard her all along. He was going to use her for 6 months, let her play house, and then trade her in for a model with a trust fund. He mocked me, Elena whispered, the realization shattering her heart. He watched me fall in love with him, and he laughed. He is a thorn, Eleanor said simply, closing the folder. We do not laugh. We calculate. I suggest you take your settlement, and leave before the 6 months are up. Save yourself the humiliation of being evicted." Eleanor left as quietly as she arrived, leaving the poison to do its work. Elena stood in the silence for a long time. Then, a cold resolve settled over her. She wouldn't be evicted. She wouldn't be the pathetic secretary crying into her pillow while he negotiated her exit. She went to the bedroom. She didn't pack the silk dresses. She didn't pack the cashmere. She packed only what she had brought: her worn jeans, her old sweaters, and her dignity. She walked to the kitchen island. She pulled the heavy diamond ring from her finger. It felt lighter instantly, yet the loss of weight made her hand ache. She placed it on the counter, right on top of the leather portfolio Eleanor had left. She didn't write a note. The ring said everything. She walked out of the penthouse, the door clicking shut with a finality that echoed in her soul. She walked out the door, believing he never loved her, but she didn't see the car speeding through the rain. When Julian walks into that empty kitchen and finds the ring, the calm CEO will disappear forever, and a desperate husband will do the unthinkable to get her back. 2 hours later, the elevator doors pinged. Julian burst into the apartment, his tie undone, his shirt sleeves rolled up, and adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He had fixed the breach. He had fired the mole. He had saved the company. But the entire time, his mind had been here, with her. "Elena!" he called out, his voice echoing in the dark foyer. "I'm back. We need to talk." Silence. "Elena?" He moved through the living room, turning on the lights. "Elena, I'm sorry I left. He stopped. The apartment was too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels empty. He checked the bedroom. The bed was made. The closet door was open. The rows of beautiful clothes were still there, but the corner where her battered suitcase had been was empty. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced his chest. He ran back to the kitchen. There, on the dark granite, sat the ring. It sparkled under the pendant lights, cold and abandoned. Julian stared at it. His breath hitched. His world, which he had just fought so hard to secure in the boardroom, crumbled in his kitchen. She was gone. She hadn't just left the room, she had left life. He picked up the ring. It was still warm from her skin. "No," he growled, a sound of pure animal desperation. He wasn't the CEO anymore. He wasn't the calm, calculated leader. He was a man who had just lost the only thing that mattered. He didn't call his driver. He didn't call security. He grabbed his keys and ran. It was raining. Of course it was raining. The sky had opened up, dumping a deluge on the city that mirrored the chaos inside Julian's chest. He drove his Aston Martin like a man possessed, weaving through traffic, ignoring honking horns and red lights. The sleek, powerful car, usually a symbol of his control, felt like a cage. He needed to be there. Now. He pulled up to the curb of the crumbling brick building in the East End. It was a stark contrast to the glass tower he had just left. The streetlights flickered, and trash cans overflowed on the sidewalk. This was where she had lived for 3 years while he sat in his ivory tower. This was where she had retreated to escape him. Julian didn't care about the rain ruining his bespoke Italian suit. He slammed the car door and sprinted to the entrance. The buzzer panel was rusted, with names scribbled on masking tape. 4B, Rivera. He pressed the button. No answer. He pressed it again, holding it down. "Go away." A tinny voice crackled through the speaker. It was her, broken, tired, and distant. "Elena, let me in," Julian shouted, not caring who heard. "I'm not leaving until I see you." "There's nothing to see," she replied. "The contract is void. You have your ring. Go marry Vanessa. Go make your mother happy." Vanessa? Mother? The confusion hit him for a second, then rage. His mother. Of course. "Elena, listen to me," he roared, hitting the door with the flat of his hand. "Whatever she told you is a lie. Let me in." The buzzer didn't buzz. He didn't wait. He waited for a tenant to exit, an old man with a dog who eyed him suspiciously, and caught the door before it closed. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his breath coming in ragged gasps. 4th floor. He stood in front of 4B. The paint was peeling. He could hear her inside and could hear the faint sound of movement. "Elena," he said, pressing his forehead against the wood. His voice was no longer a shout, it was a plea. Open the door. Go home, Julian, she said from the other side. She was close. He could picture her leaning against the door, just inches away. I'm not your project anymore. I'm not your shield against the board. I know about the plan to trade me in. There is no plan, he said, his voice cracking. There is no one else. There never has been. God, Elena, do you think I would chase a contract halfway across the city in the rain? Do you think I would leave a board meeting for an employee? You're good at pretending, she whispered. You pretended for weeks. I wasn't pretending. He slammed his fist against the doorframe, the sound echoing in the narrow hallway. I was terrified. I was a coward, okay. Is that what you want to hear? I'm the CEO of a billion-dollar company, and I was too scared to ask my secretary out on a date because I thought she deserved better than a man who is married to his job. Silence on the other side. I used the contract, he confessed, sliding down until he was kneeling on the dirty floor mat. He didn't care about the dirt. He stripped away the ego, the pride, and the armor. I used the contract because it was the only way I could think of to keep you close without risking you saying no. I thought if I could just show you who I was, outside of the office, maybe you'd learn to tolerate me. I never expected you to already love me. I never expected to be that lucky. He rested his head against the wood. I kept the video because it was the only proof I had that you saw me. Not the money. Not the title. Me. Just Julian. The hallway was silent, save for the sound of his heavy breathing and the rain drumming against the roof. He stayed there, on his knees, a beggar at the gates of the only thing he truly wanted. Then, the lock clicked. Julian scrambled to his feet as the door creaked open. Elena stood there. She was wearing her old oversized t-shirt, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. She looked exhausted, weary, and beautiful. She didn't step back. She didn't invite him in. She just looked at him, searching his face for the lie, for the mask. But there was no mask, just a man, soaked to the bone, his eyes raw with desperation. You really think I'm that much of a coward? She asked softly. I think you are too good for me, he answered instantly. And I was willing to cheat to get you. She studied him for a long moment. She wasn't ready to fall into his arms. The hurt was still there, sharp and fresh. But the anger was fading, replaced by a cautious hope. I have one question, she said, her hand tightening on the doorknob. If we hadn't gone to Vegas, if we hadn't gotten drunk, would you have ever told me? Would you have ever crossed that line? Julian looked at her, knowing that the wrong answer would close this door forever. He had to be honest, brutally, painfully honest. Julian looked at her, water dripping from his hair onto the shoulders of his ruined suit. He didn't flinch from her gaze. He didn't try to calculate the perfect PR response. He just let the truth hang in the air between them, stark and unadorned. No, he said quietly. I wouldn't have. Elena's expression flickered, a shadow passing over her eyes. I would have watched you from behind that glass wall for the rest of my life, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. I would have let you marry someone softer, someone kinder, someone who didn't work 80 hours a week. I would have convinced myself that staying away was the noble thing to do, and that would have been the biggest mistake of my life. He took a step forward, not crossing the threshold, but close enough to reach her if he dared. I needed that night in Vegas. I needed to lose control to find the only thing that actually matters. Elena let out a shaky breath, her grip on the door loosening. So what now? The contract is broken. The 6 months aren't up. Burn the contract, Julian said. I don't want a contract. I don't want a fake wife. He reached into his pocket. For a moment, Elena thought he was pulling out the massive diamond ring she had left on his counter, the symbol of their accidental, transactional union. But he didn't. He pulled out a small velvet box. It wasn't the Thorne family crest box. It was simple and navy blue. I bought this 3 weeks ago, he admitted, his thumb brushing the velvet. I walked past that antique shop you like on the 5th, the one you always stop at during your lunch break. He opened it. Inside sat a ring that was the polar opposite of the Vegas rock. It was a vintage piece, delicate gold with a sapphire that looked like a drop of deep ocean water, surrounded by tiny, intricate pearls. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't a status symbol. It was Elena. "You noticed?" she whispered, her eyes widening. "I notice everything about you," he said. "I know you hate roses but love peonies. I know you hum when you're organizing files. I know you're the only person who makes me feel like I can breathe." He didn't get down on one knee. He stood eye to eye with her, offering her equality. "I'm not asking you to be my wife right now, Elena. We did that backward. I'm asking you to let me earn it. Let me court you. Let me date you. No contracts. No deadlines. Just us." Elena looked from the ring to his face. She saw the man who had cooked for her. The man who had defended her. The man who had run through the rain to beg at her door. The fear finally dissolved, replaced by a warmth that spread from her chest to her fingertips. "Okay," she whispered, a smile breaking through her tears. "But you're paying for the first date. And it better not be a gala." Julian let out a laugh, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. "Deal." 6 months later the penthouse was no longer silent. It was filled with the sound of low jazz and the clinking of glasses. The sterile, magazine cover aesthetic had softened. There were throw blankets on the sofa, books piled on the side tables, and a vase of fresh peonies on the island. Elena sat on the rug in front of the coffee table, leaning back against the sofa. Julian was behind her, his arms wrapped securely around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. They weren't working. They weren't preparing for a board meeting. They were just being. On the coffee table, a tablet was propped up. "Are you sure you want to watch it?" Julian murmured against her ear, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I think we need to." Elena smiled, twisting the vintage sapphire ring on her finger. "For closure." She hit play. The video started. The Vegas chapel. The neon lights. I do. But this time, watching it didn't bring shame. It brought warmth. They watched the drunk versions of themselves stumbling through vows that had turned out to be prophetic. They watched the confession in the hotel room, the raw, tearful admission of love that had started it all. "Look at you." Elena laughed softly, pointing at the screen where Julian was looking at her with total adoration. "You were a goner." "I was a goner 3 years ago," he corrected, tightening his hold on her. "I just needed a little push. Or a lot of tequila," she teased. "Whatever works." The video ended, fading to black. But the room didn't feel empty. It felt full. Elena leaned her head back, looking up at her husband, her real husband, in every sense of the word. The imposter syndrome was gone. The fear was gone. She wasn't the invisible secretary anymore. She was the woman who had brought the cold CEO to his knees and then helped him stand back up. "Happy 6-month anniversary," she whispered. "Happy anniversary," Julian replied, pulling her into a kiss that tasted of forever. Outside, the city lights twinkled, no longer mocking but celebrating the quiet, perfect victory of a love that had finally come into the light. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that true love sees you even when you feel invisible, share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Like this video so more people can find hope in these stories. And subscribe if you want more narratives that feel like a warm hug on a cold night. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of your heart.